Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. We're going to continue the knife edge retention tips. This is going to be number 7. The last one was number 6, of course, and that we went over using stones that were glazed over, or the actual sharpening stone being dull. You know, everybody thinks that it's just a knife that's sharp and goes dull, but it's also the sharpening stone, especially natural stones, or well, actually any of them. You know, your diamond stones, they get dirty and kind of plugged up. Your crystalline stones do the same thing. All of them get dirty at some point or another and quit cutting the way that they should. Typically, you know, you clean them with Dawn and water and a toothbrush, or you know, that's for like diamond stones. For your natural type stones, typically it's either a diamond like resurfacing block, you know, basically an old worn out diamond stone, or loose silicon carbide powder on plate glass are about the best 2 ways to do it. So right along with that, we're going to talk about your grit choice for your pocket knife, your kitchen knife, or whatever it is that you're after. The grit choice can make a huge difference in your edge retention. Absolutely huge, okay? Typically, the higher the grit, in my experience, the less the edge retention, okay? And that seems kind of backwards, all right? And I'll kind of explain to you what I think happens during all that. Okay, now, knives cut by 2 different methods, okay? The knife either shears metal, okay, or it saws metal, okay? Saws, slices, you know, kind of the same deal. Now, if you look at a knife edge up underneath the microscope, now we're talking plain Jane, you know, regular old smooth edge knives, okay? Not serrated type knives, okay? What you think that edge looks like underneath, what it looks like in person is nice and smooth and like that, okay? It's probably not blue, but it's nice and smooth. When you look at it under magnification, that edge looks like this. Okay, now that is if you tilt your blade sideways and run it across the stone. Okay, that's, you know, all these lines right here are the scratches from the stone cutting into the steel. If you were to push your knife straight like that, then the edge would look like this. Okay, and that's going to be your scratch lines. Okay, in between these scratch lines, that is your grit choice. Okay, so let's say this, I mean, just you know, just for reference, let's say this would be 325. Okay, now this isn't actually the way it works, but it's a really good way to keep it straight in your head. Think of saw teeth. Okay, so you need to go get a new bandsaw blade, right? So you go down to Home Depot, and the bandsaw blades, they don't just have bandsaw blades, they've got bandsaw blades in different lengths for whatever frame you have. Then they also have different types, bimetal steel or carbide tipped, you know, whatever. But then they also have your teeth per inch, okay? That's the part that we're after. So if you go get a blade, a hacksaw blade that has got 10 teeth per inch, then if you take 1 inch of that blade and you mark it off and you count, there's going to be 10 teeth inside that 1 inch. A 20 tooth per inch blade is going to have 20 teeth inside that 1 inch worth of blade. Now, your 10 tooth per inch blade is going to be for cutting stuff like, well, in a hacksaw, it's going to be more like detailed cuts in wood, PVC, you know, softer type materials, maybe even aluminum. You want to go to a 20 or a 24 tooth per inch blade if you're going to be cutting things like steel, mild steel, soft tool steel, you know, things like that. So, in the case of the hacksaw, well, it's about the same thing. So the fewer teeth per inch is for the softer materials, right? Now, if you'll think that same correlation to your knife edge, okay? If you're going to use a 325 grit edge, which is what I like the most, then that would mean that there would be 325 teeth in that 1 inch, right? I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually correlate like that, but it's a good way to keep that in your head to kind of keep everything straight. So if you were using a 325 grit stone, like a diamond stone, that is great for all-around use, okay? Now on the other extreme of that would be like a straight razor, okay? Straight razor, typically when I make straight razors, I take them to a Nanawa 12,000 grit edge, and then I go ahead and strop them with green chromium oxide stropping paste, and then linen and leather. So if this is 325 of these teeth in one edge, chromium oxide paste I think is like 30,000 grit, okay? That means that each one of those teeth would be, I mean, fine enough that I'm not going to be able, you know, to make that fine a mark with the marker, all right? Now, 325 grit teeth per inch, or 12,000 or 30,000 teeth per inch, or grit, okay, is really awesome for straight razors where all you're doing is cutting hair. You take that same edge and you put it to real work, and it's going to feel really slippery, okay? Pretty much what's going to happen is you're going to put that knife edge on whatever it is you're cutting, and it's almost going to feel like the edge is slipping rather than slicing, okay? And what happens is that those little bitty teeth, there's not enough space in between of them to get a bite on the material that you're cutting, okay? So if you're cutting things like rope, you're cutting things like cardboard, leather, wood, baling wire, you know, fabric, tarps, you know, any of that kind of stuff, typically that 325 grit edge or thereabouts, between 200 and 600 grit or maybe 700 grit, somewhere in that range, is going to give you enough space in between those teeth that it's going to be a nice aggressive edge, okay? And there's the key, is that nice aggressive edges cut with less force than do these high grit edges, okay? Because these high grit edges, the teeth are so close together that they can't take enough of a bite. Another way to think about that is those hacksaw blades. If you try to take and cut a 2x4 in half with a 10 tooth per inch hacksaw blade, you'll get done with it in, you know, a fairly amount of time. I mean, it's not going to be like using a carpenter saw, you know, with like 5 teeth per inch, but you'll get done with it in a reasonable amount of time. You try cutting a 2x4 in half with a 24 tooth per inch hacksaw blade, and you will be there for what seems like hours. That cut is going to look polished by the time you're gone through it, because of all the heat that you created from the friction going back and forth through that, okay? So if you're having problems with edge retention, let's take that back a step farther. The lower teeth per inch or the lower grit edges cut with a lot less force because they're actually, each one of those teeth is actually working. When you have too high a grit edge or a polished edge, now all of a sudden those teeth aren't really grabbing. So what you do is you start putting way more force behind the cut. The second you start putting more force behind that cut, you start putting way more pressure on that edge, and you start creating an awful lot more heat and an awful lot more impact type force into that edge, and it'll make it fail an awful lot quicker. So if you're having problems with some edge retention, try backing off on your grit size, okay? If you've been finishing everything out to a 10,000 grit stone, try backing it off to a 6,000 grit stone and see what it feels like. I mean, all it's going to cost you is another stone. Or if you're having problems with, let's say you've got a lot of water stones come in 2 different grits, and a lot of stones completely, you know, your combination stones. You know, try, if you're using like a King 1/6, try the 1,000 grit side, try the 6,000 grit side, and then put those same 2 edges to the same amount of work and find out which one holds its edge the longest. Which one cuts with the least amount of force for the longest amount of time. And a lot of times a coarser edge will do that for you. So again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery, and visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time.